Greetings everyone, this is Connor from DagoraC TV, and this is Let's Talk About Game of Thrones Telltale Episode 6, episode titled The Ice Dragon. If you're unsure what Game of Thrones Telltale is, it's an episodic, story-driven experience made by, guess who? Telltale. Yeah. So, this episode is going to be a bit different than what I normally do. What I normally do in this kind of time is, I play the game on screen and kind of go through the stuff I liked and disliked, and all that jazz, while I'm playing the game on screen. With this game mainly being about the story and mainly being about, you know, your choices that you make in the moment, I don't really want to spoil anything for anyone who doesn't want to be spoiled, so I'm just going to be playing episode 1 on the PC, and this is not episode 6 gameplay. This is from the very beginning of episode 1, so if you played the game all the way up to this point, you know. If you haven't, then I suggest going and playing the other 5, because you're going to be spoiled by the previous episodes if you jump straight to episode 6. So, it's been quite alright, hasn't it, this game? You know, if you think about it, you know, it's not been the best Telltale game of all time. It's not been the best possible Game of Thrones game I think they could have made. I think they could have made it, you know, I think they could have used more interesting characters than what they have. But what they've got already really clones from the show is what they've got, and that's been my biggest flaw of the game, to be honest. The characters haven't been the most interesting in the world. The story hasn't been the best. I mean, the story I think is as good as they could have maybe got if they're going to try and coincide it alongside the show. You know, they can't exactly have something massive going on between two large-scale families, because you think, why is that not in the show? These are two low-scale families fighting for a right in a partnership with the Lannisters, between the Whitehills and the Foresters. But we are talking about this episode, which is episode 6, and it's the final part of the Game of Thrones Telltale, and I'm in a place where I'm not really fully sure what to think about it, to be honest with you. I am not fully convinced that this is satisfied me with every answer that I had. You know, I feel the Garrett's story, which is in the north of the wall, when he going to find the North Grove, I feel that story was very lackluster and it didn't satisfy every answer that I wanted to have. I believe that the North Grove concept was absolutely ridiculous. I think they could have done a lot better with that. I think they could have found some other way and answered all the questions instead of just trying to have this mystery for 5 episodes and then get there in the last one and try and rush it all, or whilst trying to make it epic at the same time. I really felt like it didn't work. I felt the action in this episode was fantastic. Some of the fights, basically some of the fights in these Telltale games, you either spam Q or it's QT, so he's telling you to press Q or E, or move whenever you want and move when it's telling you, and things like that. So you're dodging and diving and everything, and I think they're well done in this game. You know, you get stabs in the right places. If you mess up, you do mess up. You actually face the consequences of it and can carry on. I really enjoyed that. I think some of the shots from this episode are fantastic. I mean, there's one that comes to mind with Roderick when the Whitehill. These are minor stories. When the Whitehills are fighting the Foresters, there's a fantastic shot over which you can see in the trailer, and I think that was a fantastic shot. I also think that one of the positives from this was I kept Roderick alive at the end of. In episode 5, there's an ending, you know, and I'm going to spoil all previous episodes from now on, so if you don't want to hear that, tune out. I kept Roderick alive instead of Ash at the end of episode 5, and I played through the game, and, you know, I faced it with Roderick and his conversation styles and everything, but my friend played it as Asher, and I watched him play it as Asher, and I see a completely different conversation style and different ways to go about it, different circumstances arise and everything, and I feel that's the first time I've played a Telltale game where that's happened, and I'm really happy that I was able to play that, because it's so different, the difference in the story between them two storylines, and that, to me, was the best part of this episode. And, to be honest, Roderick was really the only character I cared about in the whole show, and the ending for me with him, it was very much sequel bait, and I would have much rather had a bigger conclusion than have sequel bait, to be honest. Asher, his ending, pretty much the same, you know. But the final story I haven't talked about was with Mira. And to be honest, her story, for me, it fizzled out in around about episode 4 or 5. I thought her story in the first 2 episodes was the best by far distance, with Tom and talking to Cersei and everything. I thought it was great. But it doesn't really improving this episode. It's come to its end. Her ending was kind of, felt like it was a bit predictable, and I didn't really enjoy the ending of her story. But the biggest change from this episode to the previous ones is there's really no appearance from any of the main characters in the show. There is one from Marjorie Tyrell at the very beginning of the game, but none others. You don't see Jon, you don't see Cersei, Tyrion, any Ramsay. I was surprised there was no Ramsay in this episode. I thought there would have been, which kind of got me by surprise. But I feel like they're setting up for a second one. The game hasn't been entirely successful. I don't think it's sold a huge amount of copies, but people, if they want to make a second one, I think people will still buy it. And I think I would buy the second season 2 if they did push that out, but I'm not too bothered if they don't. Okay, so let's go into the second part. Normally the first part is going to take much longer than that. It's just that there's not really much I can show you with the mechanics, because the mechanics are very basic Telltale, which you can see on the screen, and I've just quickly went through them with some of the story aspects, which I enjoyed. And for normal video games, when you've actually got mechanics and you're going around the world and doing levels and things, that's going to be the grand proportion of the episode. But for this, it's different. It's going to be going into this kind of review roundup stage where I pick out 3 reviews of what went out and pick out quotes from them and see if I agree or disagree with them and points on the review and everything. And then at the end of it, I give my own outline and give it a score and give a kind of roundup of what, and kind of give a scoring guideline of what I think it should be. So the reviews for this game: the Telltale episode 6 is given a Metacritic score of 68, which isn't the best. It's not the best in the whole series. I think the best goes to episode 1, which was, I believe, a 75. So it's not definitely been up there with when it comes to the reviews of the whole series. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. The 3 reviews I've chosen for it was Jim Sterling's review on the Jimquisition website, who scored the game the joint lowest of the Metacritic, which was a score of 50. The next one was Stephen Koutsoukas' review on the Greek gaming website called RageQuit.gr, which gave it the highest score on Metacritic of a 93. And the final one I gave it was around the middle score, which I pick one at random, which was by Alexa Ray Corrier at GameSpot, who gave the game score an 80. So the way I'm going to start this, I'm going to go from the scores, from top to bottom, and then see how we get there. So, Rage Quit. The review that I read is obviously in Greek, and I had to translate it to English, so some of the quotes may be lost in translation, perhaps, but you could get a general grip of the view. If you want to read the full reviews, they are all in the description below. So he gave the game a episode a 93 rated, and this is the first quote that I picked out. He says, "To finale of the highly successful Game of Thrones Telltale finally provides effective diversification in the now familiar formula of the company. In a move comparable to the second act of The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, one of the central characters is quite different, depending on our decisions at the end of the previous episode. I agree with the ending of this statement. Yes, the main character, really, Roderick or Asher, very much different sides you face, depending on what you picked earlier on in the game. Similar to the concept of The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings, like he says there. I do not agree that he says it provides an effective diversification in the familiar formula of the company, mainly because it's Telltale, it's what it's done. It's doing this since the Walking Dead game, which was very successful. I don't see this as a change. I see this as very much the same. It's just been a bit more grim at the end, and I don't see how it's changed, and he doesn't really back it up how it's changed at all. I agree with him. Yes, the central characters is different depending on what you pick, definitely, but to argue that this has been different than all the stuff that Telltale has done before, I think that is incorrect, and if he's going to make that point, he definitely needs to back it up a bit more. Second quote I picked out, he says, "Honestly, I did not expect such a creative sensitivity on the part of Telltale. On the other hand, they have proven in the past that they have a will and ability to adapt to a public's demands. The negative reviews received by the company tend to multiply with the constant repetition of the same formula in their games." Yeah, I don't see how that is adapting to the public demands. I think Telltale is the kind of company that will accept any license that has been offered to them that week. If I'm going to be honest with you, I don't see how I don't really see his point. I don't see how they've been completely creative. It's followed really... The structure was done well, I agree, in the sense that the way it bounced back between characters was very good, but I don't see how they've been creative with the story. I don't see really how they've been creative with the characters. You could maybe argue a point of the North Grove, but they didn't really answer every question I had with that. And the idea that they do constantly the same formula is kind of denying his point in a way, and I don't really see that in his review. Maybe a lost in translation thing at the end of the day. Okay, so the final quote we're going to go to here is, he says, "As the closing mechanism and organic blend nicely seasoned in a combination with the double final episode, it provides the strongest illusion of choice that the series has given us so far in a game of Telltale. The quality of writing is still at the highest level, and was almost comical how positive an impression I had after my 10-hour involvement in the abortive and stillborn Fallout 4. The hazy yes-no unsure sarcasm is all the same anyway. Do not bother dialogue systems of the latter made me momentarily forget what it means to have a really talented people in a writing team." So basically what he's saying in this point was the poor use of the dialogue system in Fallout 4 made him feel that this game was better, and the writing in this game is really good. Did I think that the writing game in this game is very good? At times, I think it was. At times I thought some of the conversations were fantastic, especially in the early episodes. In this episode, I don't know. I think the North Grove wasn't well written. I don't think that some of the stuff that you could do with Mira was well written. I think he was kind of shut in a corner and has what he says here, the illusion of choice. You know, that's not a good thing you want. You want to actually have choice that makes a difference, not to have the illusion of it. With Roderick, you did have some well written stuff. You know, there was times when I felt like, you know, I was making an impact with some of my phrases that I was putting out. And to end off his review, he outlines, "Finally, and for the first time, the Telltale had wrote so many different variations for an episode. The company's future is outlined here. Rich, hearty, and epic. Black. Excellent level of writing." I don't think that the company's future is going to be outlined in this review. Outlined in this game, sorry. Is the game rich and hearty? Not really. Is it epic? It is, to be fair, with the stuff that goes on. Some of the fights are epic. Is it black? Not. It is, you know. Some of the ending is quite dark of this game, and the level of writing is good at points, but not always. And I don't think this is the best review to justify the game, personally. So we'll go into the GameSpot review, which was done by Alexa Ray Correa, who gave the score of 80, and she goes on by saying the finale of Telltale's Game of Thrones series finally takes into account the choices you have made in the past 5 episodes. There have been tough decisions aplenty since episode 1's launch last December, although they never have felt quite as though they connected to something meaningful down the line. True, very much true. That surprised me about this game. The choices that you make with Mira, for example, come up later on. The choices you make with Garrett Tuttle pop up out of nowhere, and that surprised me. That was the kind of something that kind of popped up, which I didn't really think about. And yeah, this puts it straight into perspective, because earlier on they felt kind of stupid choices that he was making them in the moment, and reviews actually criticised it, saying the choices don't have much of an impact, when they have now. The second quote is, "However, the Ice Dragon introduces more magical elements into the series. Elements that make you feel like they would be more at home in Harry Potter than Game of Thrones. They feel a little too Deus Ex Machina, and just a tad too fantastical to not roll your eyes at. I recognise that Game of Thrones contains its fair share of the eerie, including snow zombies and women birthing shadow creatures. But the show never presents itself as supernatural, to someone that is just hanging around waiting to be utilised." I kind of agree. I kind of agree and kind of disagree. I agree in the sense that this is more fantastical and more magical than all the other episodes. Do I think it's too much for Game of Thrones? No way in hell. I think the show has a lot more fantastical moments than what this episode does. This episode has got, you know, some features, you know, with whites and everything and people being resurrected, and I suppose there is, you know, there is the stuff with blood magic that's going on, which is a bit eerie, that could turn you off. But as the episode as a whole, not fully. But like this is like what you have with everyone. You know, it depends how well you can desensitize to this kind of stuff. If you completely detest the supernatural element and can't stand it, then parts of the game you're probably going to switch off. But the fact is that it's not all the game. You know, it's really not even a third of the game. It's one of the storylines, but it's kind of a part of it for about 10 minutes, and it did feel rushed in my opinion. And it could be up to her, you know, whether she feels like it doesn't belong in the game. But personally, I felt like it did. But it was one of the reasons I will say that I wasn't fully with the North Grove, because it kind of came out of nowhere, really. The final quote was, "In other instances, small, seemingly unimportant decisions being made at the beginning of episodes can mean life and death for others, or whether or not you can get your way. Being cocky to a potential new ally could cost you their respect. Allowing someone you love to stay near the front lines of battle could result in a terrible end for them later. And if you send them away beforehand, they may be very angry, but at least they'll be safe. It's a delicate balancing act, and the tension these decisions create has a lasting effect. This episode is very good at making you second-guess yourself." Yeah, that was something. This episode did that more so than any of the other episodes in this Telltale series. There was points. There was a lot of times though in this episode when I did second guess myself, especially with some of the close family members. And yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly well. You know, this episode, great. You know, there is times when you feel like you should make a different choice, or the choice in the moment may not always be the right one. You see the consequence of it later, and that's what it does really well. And the outline for this review was the good. Choices made early in the series matter in big ways. I wouldn't say big ways, but yeah, they do matter. Two completely different episodes to play, depending on the last episode's final choice. Yep, we already covered that. Genuinely gross and powerful sad moments are the emotional high moments. I didn't really feel emotionally connected, and that's because I didn't really connect to the characters of the series. But I felt they were weak. I felt there was a bit white bread, to be honest with you, and probably that's why that didn't connect with me. The bad magical elements feel out of place. Kind of agree, kind of disagree. I agreed that it felt kind of random, but it didn't feel out of place to the North Grove. And sometimes elements feel copied from wholesale from source material. Definitely, could not agree more. And the final review was by Jim Sterling of the Jimquisition, who gave it the joint lowest score of a 50. And he says, "The sixth and final episode from Game of Thrones is an unfortunate disappointment that ends in the resolution of nothing. It's merely a continuation of the humiliation conga that is House Forrester's biography. One that ends with a cliffhanger rather than anything of substance." Yes, it does. I wouldn't say it necessarily is a cliffhanger, because it does end with, you know, the White Hills having Iron Wrath, most of your family getting killed, and just you really escaping as Roderick to save House Forrester when pretty much everything has been crippled, which has basically been the story of the whole season. You know, it does feel like a continuation of the humiliation of the house, like he says, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a cliffhanger. Is it the resolution of nothing? In a way. You know, Mira's story kind of seems a bit pointless at the end, when it comes to the end of things. It kind of feels like it was just there to have a few characters in there from the show. Garrett's story, did it really resolve nothing? Not really, because you make a choice at the end of that, whether to have the cliffhanger ending or to stay and defend. And it kind of depends what you chose on that point, but really, I can kind of agree with him, but I don't think I agree with him so bluntly as he put it. His second quote that I picked out was, "Don't get me wrong, I'm not one of those people who crave a happy ending. I wouldn't be a fan of A Song of Ice and Fire if I was, but you can only maintain an atmosphere of depressing failure for so long that it invokes apathy in the audience. Had there been more hope spots throughout the season, more opportunities to score some meaningful wins, then an ending this dismissal would have worked." Definitely agree. Yeah, it always feels like, you know, the Foresters are getting kicked down. There was the odd time, you know, when you feel like, alright, okay, they're coming back, but then just get hit straight back down again. And I feel like it tries to get that sadness from Game of Thrones a bit too much, when really, yeah, it should have more hope moments. And then it would, yeah, I agree, it would have made this episode more impactful, probably would have made you connect to the characters a bit more, instead of just seeing them as just this pathetic household. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. And his final quote was, "Structurally, the episode is sound. It's as well paced as any other, and its action scenes are pretty solid. As objectively as possible, I can say it's as good as any episode in the series to date." Would I agree with that? I don't know. I think episode 1 and 5 were fantastic. I don't think this was. I felt that this one was kind of a bridge too far and didn't really answer many of the questions. Structurally, yes it is. Action scenes are the best in the show. There was one in episode 4 which was really good, but I think combined, I think this was. Yeah, some of the shots in this were fantastic. And he finishes off with, at least the little ending and narrative is nice. Even you'll spend most of your time saying it, wait, is that it? Yes. Yes, that's really it. And, like I was saying, you know, it doesn't answer all the questions and you feel like you've been shortchanged. So, to kind of sum up everything of my points, I kind of really enjoy the action season in this. I thought some of the shots were phenomenal. The invasion on Ironrath from the White Hills was fantastic. The episode was structured really well, you know, bouncing forward between each characters was great, leaving at the right moments, not overstaying its welcome. The best probably throughout the season, the structure-wise. The fact is, though, like I've said time and time again throughout the episode, is that the interest in the characters may have dimmed my enjoyment of the episode. They copied from the show big time, you know, Garrett is Jon Snow, Roderick is Rob Stark, sorry. His mother is Catelyn, Mira is Sansa, Asher is Jaime. You know, it feels very, very much, you know, these are people from the show, we're just going to mask them. And the family is basically the Starks. That's kind of how it feels to me. Mira's story did fizzle out, and the North Grove concept was hard to believe. After having all this mysteriousness about it, seeing it all there didn't give it enough answers. It was rushed while trying to make it feel epic with this battle. I didn't really relate to it that much. I'll say that I'm slightly disappointed at the ending because it was, you know, kind of sequel bait. Not necessarily a cliffhanger, it was kind of going like, okay, you're going to answer everything else in the sequel, and not a full conclusion. I would have much preferred a full conclusion. And that's why I'm going to agree with Jim Sterling and give it a 5 out of 10. 5 out of 10 on the scale, as you can see, is mediocre. Not necessarily bad or good. It's right in the middle of a game that's average. Would I say it's worth a try? With the price that it's at, you can get episode 1 for free at the minute. So I would say give episode 1 a go. You can get it on your phone, so there's no excuse not to play it. You can get it on the PC on sales quite regularly. You can get it on your PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. I think you can get it on the last-gen consoles as well. So, yeah, why not? Give it a go. Give episode 1 a go. I wouldn't go out and buy all the episodes at once. I'd buy one, and then see if you like that, and then if you did, continue with it. But I wouldn't set your heart on it being incredible because of its Game of Thrones. You may like it more because it's set in that world, but there is better Telltale games out there, like The Wolf Among Us, like The Walking Dead Series 1. Would I play a second one if that one came out? I think I would, but I don't think I'd be so keen to play on it on the first day it came out. I'd probably wait a little while, see how it's gone down with reviews and everything, and then give it a go. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's not grasped me so much that I want to know what happens. I can wait quite a while for a new one. And to be honest, that's kind of been the story of playing each episode as they come out. It's been kind of waiting and waiting and waiting. I think if you've not touched the game series until now, and you're kind of interested in what the other episodes had to offer, don't let this episode put you off completely. Like, I do feel like some of the answers to the questions weren't there, but some people really enjoyed it. Like Stephen, who gave the first review at Rage Quit, he really enjoyed the game, so it could be for you at the end of the day. Also, what we've got coming up on the channel, we've got the GNM podcast coming up. We also have we've got a Fallout 4 video coming up. We also have the Lore series coming back, and also make sure you follow me on Twitter at DagoraC. Link in the description. It's all there. If you want to help Patreon fund the channel, there is a link in the description to that. Also, we're also on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, Podomatic.com, Podbay for all the podcasts and everything out there. You can go check them out. And also, yeah, please subscribe if you enjoyed it. Also, leave your comments on if you have played this episode, what you think of it, and what do you think in comparison to the reviews. Do you think the reviews give it justice? Do you feel the fact that there's not really much of a gap between the highest and lowest reviews? There's a lot of reviews that gave it a 50. A lot of reviews gave it a 50. So how do you feel about that? If you want to read any of the reviews that we used in this episode, in the link in the description below. If you want to see the Metacritic, also in the link. Thanks for watching the episode, and goodbye.
Rather cute little creatures, aren't they?
I guess. This might help.